Welcome to Puck Talk CS. I am honored to be joined today by the queen of New York hockey, Mollie Walker. We got to know each other a little bit last year. It's great to have you on the show, Mollie.
Oh, thank you so much, Matthew. I appreciate it.
And I know I'll give the shout out, won't say what specific high school, but I substitute teach there now. So it's pretty funny how full circle everyone in this area is. Dan Rosen and Colin both live local too. So it's pretty funny
Yep.
how all the roots are around.
We got ourselves a little Bergen County squad.
So, Molly, I wanted to start off right before we hopped on. We talked about how this season has been hard on you as well from the media side of things. How does this season compare to the others you covered? I asked the same question to Arthur Staple a few weeks back, and he said in all of his experience, the craziest.
Yeah, well, Arthur obviously has a lot more seasons under his belt than I do, so I feel like it doesn't carry as much weight, but I absolutely agree with that sentiment. Since I started covering Ranger games at the end of the 2019-20 season, the Rangers have been on the ups. It's been a pretty steady inclination every single season. Obviously, the first round exit against the Devils was a bit of a bump in the road, but it's been a pretty steady trajectory for the Rangers since I've been on full time. And I remember, talking to guys like Braden Schneider and Will Cooley the last couple of years and just being like, how lucky do you feel to be, in a team like this? They really have never known what it's like to lose and what it's like to have drama, what it's like to be waiting for the trade deadline to come, wondering whether or not your teammates are going to be there or not. So this was a first for a lot of the guys in that locker room and for me personally as well. So it's been definitely a lot different for a multitude of reasons. And I know we as media always talk about the vibes around the team and the feeling in the room and things like that. And it definitely had a lot of low pits this season that were difficult to navigate for everybody involved. It's, losing locker rooms aren't fun. And the Rangers certainly had their stretch this season that made it difficult. But hey, I mean, they're still right in it regardless, which is pretty crazy to think about when you think about where they were during that 4-15 stretch earlier in the season. I don't think if you said to anybody that they would be competing for a wild card spot that anybody would have believed you. So
I know I call it Groundhog's Day, like the movie and the day itself. Like it's cold, it's rough to get up and get going, and it's also like the movie where it feels like the same situation, 1 point out at
right.
all times. You mentioned Will Cooley. He takes home the Stephen McDonald Extra Effort Award as voted on by the fans. It seemed like that was a long time coming. What have you seen in his development? I know from training camp last year, you kept mentioning him, and that forced me to keep an eye on him from that point forward. You were like the one person really, I think,
Yeah.
for lack of better terms, like tooting his horn.
Mm.
I paid attention. Now the whole fan base knows exactly what he is. What have you seen in his development?
Well, I just feel like, I mean, from the people I've spoken to in Cooley's past, he's always been a man amongst boys. He just always has been at every single level that he's played at. That's been his thing. He never looked like a boy amongst men. He was always the opposite, setting that tone for the other players around him. And I thought it was so impressive how that continued to be the case during his rookie season. And I think a lot of that is because Cooley plays such a simple game, such a simple game. And I've talked to him about this, and he's like, I'm not out there trying to deke anybody. He's no Artemi Panarin, stupid shit at the blue line type of player at all. But I think that Cooley knows the kind of player that he is, and he plays to that simplicity, and that is what has made him so effective. And I think this is just a natural progression of a young player having another full season in the NHL under his belt. All of that comes with confidence, repetition, and the game slows down for you too as you're getting more reps and more game experience. So I think Cooley has been put in such a great position. He's played a lot of games since he was a rookie. He has been a constant in the Rangers lineup almost. I think he was scratched, I think, one game last season. So he's been so consistent for them, and it's because he plays such a simple game. You know exactly what you're going to get from him every night, and that was the case during the tough stretches of the season where Cooley was still providing that same energy and bringing the same things that he does to the ice every single night. So it doesn't surprise me at all that the fans were able to recognize that as well. I think him and Jonathan Quick were probably two of the only worthy players of that award this season.
Yeah, and last night was there was a lot to enjoy as a fan and also as anyone who enjoys hockey to keep along with story-wise. One of those stories was Gabriel Perreault earning his first NHL contest, and none better than at Madison Square Garden. So, what were your thoughts of last night overall? Maybe the vibes in the building with, Zuccarello wearing a Rosen jersey in warm-ups to how Gabe Perreault performed in his debut.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great game. Definitely no short of action and horrible, egregious turnovers on both sides of the ice. But yeah, I mean, Matt Zuccarello, just an absolute class act from him. We've seen it from a bunch of people around the league this season for Sam Rosen. He is just the easiest guy to celebrate. And obviously, Zuccarello was a member of the Rangers organization for a while and spent a considerable amount of time around Sam Rosen. And anybody that's spent a considerable amount of time around Sam Rosen just wants to celebrate the guy right now because he's just an absolute gem of a human being. And what a cool thing to see your last name on a player on the ice, and I read that the whole Wild team signed it for him. So just an incredible gesture. Perreault gets his rookie lap. You got the BC boys in the corner banging on the glass, just like they were for Ryan Leonard in Boston when he made his debut for Washington. Yeah, that's always super fun to see. I mean, we were just talking on our podcast, these players that make the jump from college to the NHL level. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. I think back to Cale Makar, my senior year at UMass, losing in the Frozen Four national, the final at Frozen Four, hopping on a plane, getting to Calgary, playing his hometown team in the playoffs, first shift, first shot, first goal, like the craziest story ever. And I remember turning to my roommates and being like, my guy was eating in a dining hall last week and he's now on an NHL charter. And it's the craziest thing ever. So you can only imagine how overwhelming that is, especially coming off of a very disappointing loss for BC. Obviously, it's a crazy turnaround. But I thought he looked like he belonged. I don't think he looked out of place. He was involved. He had that crazy pass to Lafreniere, who wasn't even ready for it because it was a very dynamic play. So I think that there's a lot to be excited about Perreault. Obviously, his number one asset is his brain. That's kind of been the consensus amongst everybody that I've spoken to. I was told that he just thinks the game so fast that he problem solves his way through every challenge that pops up in front of him. So all this concern about him keeping up with the pace and the speed and the physicality, the counter argument is that he's so smart that he'll be able to handle it. So first game, pretty good. Excited to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, it was a very exciting game. Again, like you mentioned, 1 point out, and now you have a little bit of steam with some of the younger players. Braden
Hmm.
Schneider, Will Cooley, Lafreniere, you name them, they've started to take over again. In your time reporting for the team, for the Post, you saw the rebuild, and then you
Hmm.
saw that advance, and it seemed like younger players were just here and there filling holes in the lineup, and it's back to being an influx of young talent. I was curious to hear your thoughts about where you think the direction of this is going, at least from just maybe inside information or just from what you observe with how many young players are on the roster at this moment.
Yeah, I think it's similar to what we're seeing when Keandre Miller came through. It was kind of a few of them came all at once. And now we're seeing Othman, Berard, Rempe. I mean, there are a lot of rookie faces in the lineup this season compared to the last couple of seasons. So I think that it's just kind of a byproduct of the system, the farm system. You just feel like when the players are ready, they just come through one by one, depending on where they're coming from. Obviously, with Perreault, they opt to burn the first year of his entry level contract to bring him up here, rather than sending him to Hartford. I mean, it was the last 8 games of the season. I mean, you have everything to gain, nothing to lose, truly. I mean, if Perreault can come in and help your playoff hopes, and gain some experience from it, and you get a leg up on scouting him for the next season to see how he could possibly fit in next season's lineup. I think it's a win-win for both parties for sure. But yeah, we are seeing a bit of a youth movement coming through here, and it's been very much so needed, obviously, because a lot of the veteran players have not performed up to their best of their abilities this season at all. Aside from Artemi Panarin and Igor Shesterkin, Jonathan Quick, it's hasn't been that great of a season for the veterans, obviously. So I think that the Rangers recognized that they needed to inject some new life into the lineup, and that's when we saw, Brett Berard came up, Othman followed shortly after. So, youth always injects some life into a locker room and into a team. So, I think it was just a natural progression of what the Rangers needed this season.
Has any young player or veteran stepped up in a little more of a leadership role that you didn't expect?
Not that I didn't expect, but since Truba was traded, Vincent Trocheck has clearly taken on a bit of that leadership voice. He's talked after losses a lot, in the Rangers post-game videos that you see with the Broadway hat and such. He's always the one giving out the pucks and things of that nature. So he's definitely stepped up, and that's a good thing, obviously, because Trocheck is signed pretty long term with the Rangers. So I think it was Trocheck recognizing that somebody else needed to fill that void a little bit. So he has seemingly taken that on. And I mean, Johnny Brodzinski has also been. I mean, he is just such a great story in general. But Johnny Brodzinski has been the consensus player that all the youngsters have said have really taken them under his wing and helped answer questions or anything that they may need. Obviously, he was in Hartford for a while and has bounced between the AHL and the NHL for a majority of his career. So he's got a lot of insight into that way of life. So he's been huge for them too.
How would you describe the overall status of the club? Do you think this is a position where they're looking to retool significantly, maybe just plug some holes and see where the youth brings them? Where ahead of the summer do you think this is going?
Yeah, I think it's definitely not where it was at the end of last season. No, I mean, it's been a tough year, and I think everybody recognizes that it's been a tough year and that changes need to be made. So I think that I expect a retool, especially because of how many players they have who need new contracts at the end of this season. It kind of gives them an opportunity to do that. Um, but I definitely think that it was a big step back this season for a multitude of reasons. So I think that there is a plan to retool as much as they're able to with the space that they have and the moves that they can make. Um, but obviously, the influx of youngsters has been encouraging. But it it was not the year. It was not the year that anybody wanted it to be. It was harder than I think anybody thought it was going to be. So I think a lot of it will be decided in the next few games. Whether or not they make the playoffs or not is going to have a huge impact on things too. But I think that, I mean, already the Rangers look like an entirely different team than they did at the start of the season. So it's pretty safe to say that things will continue to move as they prioritize what they're trying to be going forward.
And regardless of where the Rangers end up, playoffs or not, you will be still scribing, still posting online. Something that I've really enjoyed following with your work is how accessible you make your lifestyle as a reporter. How do you see your fit in this modern journalistic world?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I have an advantage because when I went to journalism school, digital media was all the rage, so to say. Like the biggest thing that we were taught at UMass journalism school was you didn't want to be a one trick pony. you don't want to just be a writer. You don't want to just be a podcaster. You don't want to just be an on air talent. You want to be able to do all three so that you can provide all different types of content for whatever media outlet you're working, because most media outlets don't just do one type of media anymore. So I think I was really fortunate that I was going through school at a time when the industry was really starting to take a massive turn into the digital world. So I was able to be educated on all different forms of media and work on those skills in the classroom first before I made the jump to working in the real world. Um, I think that multimedia is the future, and that's how everybody prefers to take in their content now. So you just want to be good at everything, as much of everything that you can be good at. So I've just tried to, use my skills that I've learned. And I think, in sports in general, the median age of the people who work in it is it's pretty high. So I think that does give me an advantage and does give us young people a little bit more of an advantage because they never had to do things like that. So some of them either don't, care to try anymore, which I don't blame them, or, just don't see the value in it. But it definitely helps for our case. It gives us a little bit of a leg up because we're so well trained in that department.
Well, the content is amazing, and there's no shortage of Molly Walker around the New York area, New York Post, whether it's in written form, whether it's in the videos in the studio, Sam Rosen interview, up in the Blue Seats podcast. Molly, you are all over the beat, and I really appreciate that you came on today. Thank you.
Of course, thanks for having me on.
Have a good rest of the day.
Thanks, you too.